My name is Renee, and I'm glad to have you here with us. Vesta, our mission is to provide education, connection, and support to help you navigate the divorce process with some clarity and confidence. And we just celebrated 13 years, so yay for us. The three original founders needed to have a better experience for those going through divorce, as their experiences were not smooth. That's how Vesta came about. Today's session, again, we're focusing on the marital home and what happens during and post-divorce. The topic often feels overwhelming, but it's important to understand your options, and you'll get some good information tonight. So again, just quickly, the chat has been disabled, so if you do have questions, please put them in the Q&A section. It is anonymous, and you'll also see the poll. If you could answer that, it just helps us understand who's in attendance tonight. And again, that is anonymous as well. So we're going to get started. So we've got an experienced panel of professionals tonight, and we're all going to share our insights on the financial aspect of the home during divorce and covering everything from valuations and mortgages and real estate considerations to planning for long-term financial health. Keep in mind that the legal piece tonight is based on New Hampshire law. So there are other events in other states that will have a different focus on the legal side, but tonight is New Hampshire. But please check out the Vesta website. If you are in another state, there could be events held in your area. I encourage you to ask questions, and we're going to start off with just some quick introductions of the panel tonight. I'm going to start with Michelle. Introduce yourself and pass it on.
Hi, everybody. I'm Michelle Papandrea. I am a certified divorce coach. I work with men and women pre, during, post-divorce, focusing on the emotional aspects of divorce, contemplating divorce, making the best decisions for yourself, helping you prepare to work with your lawyer, mediator, getting you all the resources that you might need. And I am certified to work with people in all states, not just New Hampshire.
Awesome. Thank you, Michelle. Next, we have Laura.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Laura Gamache. I'm a real estate broker. I am licensed in New Hampshire and Massachusetts. However, I have a network of agents that I work with nationally and internationally. So if you are in another state and you need some resources, certainly don't hesitate to reach out. Happy to connect you with someone more locally. But I am here to just walk you through the steps of what your options look like during this process and what might be just the best financial decision while you're going through this process. So I look forward to diving in more with you this evening. Thanks again.
Thanks, Laura. And Kate.
Hi, everyone. I am Kate Blake. I'm a family law attorney. My practice encompasses both out-of-court resolution, helping people through the mediation process or through a collaborative divorce. I also do direct attorney negotiation, all out-of-court processes. And then a component of my practice is also litigation in the court system. I am licensed in both Massachusetts and New Hampshire. But tonight we are in the New Hampshire Hub, so we will be focused on New Hampshire law. And I will be here in the background for most of the presentation, being able to answer questions through the Q&A function if you have anything specific that you want to ask. Just please note that this is not necessarily legal advice. This is more just what the law is. If you want to have a consult, then reach out to Mandy and she can put us in touch.
Fabulous. Thank you, Kate. And speaking of Mandy, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Mandy Pullenbar, and I am a concierge specialist with Vesta, and it is my honor and privilege to be able to speak to so many people that are navigating this process and to help you put a roadmap together, whether it be working with its entire panel of amazing professionals or one or two based on your unique situation. We take the time and really dive into your particulars. I put my calendar link in the chat. I would love for you to schedule a time for us to talk, and we will be giving you a call tomorrow to see how your experience was this evening. I leave you in excellent hands. Thank you.
Thank you, Mandy. And I'm Renee Coleman. I am a residential mortgage lender. I am also the owner of Divorce Mortgage Planning of New England, and I'm happy to be here tonight. I've been a part of Vesta for about 5 years now, and I'm looking forward to tonight's presentation. Tonight, we're going to start on the legal side, so I am going to hand it over to Kate.
Actually, we're starting with the emotional side. Sorry.
Oh, sorry, my apologies.
Sorry, everybody.
Ciao.
No problem. All right, guys. Introduce myself. I'm a certified divorce coach. I focus mostly on the emotional aspects, but there are legal and financial, as the team has stated as well. And one of the biggest decisions and emotional aspects of divorce is whether to keep or sell the marital home. As we discussed already, today we're going to provide you with lots of information so you can make an educated and confident decision regarding that marital home. And I'm going to start by talking about reasons that you might consider keeping the home or not keeping the home. Some of those reasons might be for the stability. I am sharing my screen, right? Everybody?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay,
Trish.
thank you. I couldn't see it on my Zoom, so I wanted to make sure. For stability for you and your children, that comfort and continuity through the divorce and post-divorce, staying in the same environment, in the same home. Might have some sentimentality or emotional attachment to the home. And even that fear of the unknown. How are you going to feel to leave? It just adds that much more uncertainty to the whole process if you feel like you might not have the home you've had for 15, 20 years. So together we would talk about the emotional pieces of why you might want to keep the home. And then we would talk about maybe some of the reasons you wouldn't want to keep the home, why you might consider selling the home. Because keeping the home might put a financial strain on yourself if you are now the one in the home running the home by yourself. Staying in the home can hinder your emotional healing for you and potentially the kids. There's good and bad memories in that home. So sometimes, that keeps you from moving forward. Is keeping the home aligned with your long-term goals that we work through during coaching, or your financial reality, as I already stated? Does the home truly provide you stability and potentially children if you have children? Would a new home, possibly a more affordable home, offer more long-term peace and healing for everybody? And maybe it is a necessary step in order for you to move forward. So we talk about what does it look like if you were to keep the home and own the home on your own. You're now solely responsible for paying all the bills and maintaining the property. We're talking about New Hampshire, but here in New England, we all know we have lots of snow and ice, and then that goes away and we have spring cleanup and mowing the lawn, and it's about to be fall, the leaves are going to fall. So that would all be your responsibility. What would that look like? Do you always hire someone to remove your snow? Are you used to shoveling yourself? If you hire someone, could you continue to do that? As a coach, we would make sure that's in your budget. And then, of course, in your budget when you're working with a financial person. Then there's the things like what happens to things in the home? What if your hot water heater breaks? Can you afford to do some of those maintenance kind of things? Do you feel confident and comfortable when things need to be fixed around the house, calling somebody and having someone come in and fix things? One of the big things is now being home alone, whether you're always home alone or you're 50% home alone because your children are with the other parent for a while. And again, as I said before, how would you feel living in a place with the good and the bad memories in that home? Lots of people talk about remodeling, even if it's just repainting, switching out pictures and things like that to make it feel more like your own home. And we would also talk about what it looks like, not only to sell the home, but what it might look like if you keep the home, but you aren't the one who stays in the home. What does that look like? How do we go about finding you a new house or renting a place? Nesting is something some people do where the parents go in and out of the marital home, but the kids stay there for the stability for the kids and the familiarity during the divorce and post-divorce. And we would discuss some of the nuances around how that works and what that might feel like to come and go from a house and have the shared responsibility with the other parent to do the dishes and do the laundry and do the grocery shopping and things like that. And in those cases, people who nest, sometimes they share an alternate apartment, or they both get separate apartments, or they stay with their parents or a friend or whatnot. And as I already said, we would also talk about what it would feel like to sell the home if that came down to the option. So I am going to pass it off now to Kate to go over the legal considerations.
Thank you. So as I mentioned, this is focused on New Hampshire law. In New Hampshire, we have equitable distribution. Equitable does not mean equal, but generally the longer a marriage goes on, the more likely assets are going to be divided equally. And that means all assets, regardless of whose name is on that asset, whether it's a joint asset or an individually held asset, or when it was acquired. If it was before the marriage, during the marriage, it does not matter. So even if only one person's name is on the title of your house, it does not mean that they are the only one who owns it. It does not mean that is not a marital asset subject to division. It is something that is part of the marital estate and needs to be divided. I want to make clear everybody understands what is factored into when we talk about net equity. So really, when you own a home, from a very pure legal perspective, the very basic options are one person buys out the other, or there is a sale at some point. If we are going to talk about a buyout, we need to know what the net equity amount is. And that means you need to have a determination about what the market value is for the home. That can be done by a real estate agent giving you a comparative market analysis, or it can be done by an appraisal. Or you and your spouse could simply say, you know what, I know what the market is, and this is a number that feels reasonable to us, and you agree on what that value is. And then you subtract whatever the outstanding encumbrances are. If you have a first mortgage, a second mortgage, a home equity line, all of that reduces the value to come up with your net equity. And then very typically it's a 50-50 division. So whoever is retaining the house has to pay out the other 50% of that net equity. I raise the issue of net equity because sometimes I have the client who is keeping the house and they'll say to me, that amount's going to be higher than if we actually sold the property and had to pay for a real estate commission, or we had to have other closing costs. And the reality of it is, yes, that is the cost to you to keeping that house. We typically don't deduct the hypothetical broker's commission or other closing costs. So that's why you really should meet with somebody like Renee who can go over all of the different options so you really understand what it means to keep the house and buy out that other person. And if it's one of those things where you're on the fence of should I, shouldn't I, and you might end up selling in the future, you may end up getting, depending on what the market is, less than what you actually bought out the spouse for. And I know when our financial people get on, they're going to talk about capital gains. So you also could be losing the ability to have that capital gain. So I often tell clients, if you think there's a possibility of selling in the next few years, you may want to just sell it now rather than buy out the other spouse. Another common question I get is, do I have to keep living with my spouse? Do we have to keep living together while the divorce is pending? And while the divorce is pending, the default is that, yes, you will continue to live together unless there is an agreement not to, or a court order requiring somebody to move out of the home. If you do not want to continue to live with your spouse, nobody's going to force you to continue to live in that home. And I tell you that because it's important to know that you don't lose any rights to the home by moving out. You don't lose any rights to that net equity. So you can move out, but I tell you that with two cautionary tales. So number one is, once you move out, it is very difficult to get back in. If there's a possibility that you want to keep the home, I generally don't recommend that you move out because it is so difficult to get back into the home. And then if you do have children, minor children, you want to make sure that there is some parenting arrangement, agreement before you actually move out so that the child or children can continue to have parenting time with both of you. This is not about parenting time, but just a quick note that there is a new statute in New Hampshire that is a presumption that there's going to be approximately equal parenting time with people. And then the other option while the divorce is pending is something called nesting. That is where if you have children, the children stay in the home and you and your spouse take turns alternating into the house to have parenting time with your children. That situation, either you both have someplace else that you can go, another apartment, a friend's home, or family members during your non-parenting time, or sometimes people will rent a small, like 1 or 2 bedroom apartment so that you both have someplace else to go when it's not your parenting time with the children. I raise the issue of nesting just because I like to make sure people have all that information. In my experience, nesting really only is effective in shorter term arrangements. It's not really the best situation for long-term processes. You have to have a lot of comfort level with both of you, trust, make sure that you're really spelling out what this nesting arrangement looks like, that there is some kind of safety valve that if it's suddenly not working out, that one of you has the ability to end that situation. I'll also tell you that nesting is generally not something that's ordered by a judge. It's something that really people have to agree to that type of arrangement. So you really just want to make sure that if you're doing this, that you've really outlined the pros and cons and that you're not in some situation where you're showing up at the house and the other spouse is being passive aggressive and has left the house a complete disarray with no food, and you spend most of your parenting time coming into the house to fix their chaos. That's never a good thing. And then can you just go back? I don't know if I got the last point. Nesting post-divorce and what if we can't agree? So nesting post-divorce, I think that is the type of thing that is a lot more difficult to do on a more permanent basis. And most judges, because ultimately your agreement has to be approved by a judge, most judges will only approve that if it's got that clear parameters and an end point for that to happen. And then my point about what if we can't agree? So what if we can't agree on who's keeping the house or what's going to happen to it? A lot of times, if you are in a court process, if you can't agree, absent some compelling reason, most likely a judge is going to order that house to be sold. I have had cases where judges have ordered that the parties almost enter into a bidding war with each other. So whoever is the highest bidder that can actually fulfill that bid is the one who receives the house. I've also recently had a judge who ordered that it be put on the open market and that each party could then bid against the highest bid that they receive. So it's not always ideal. It's always pretty good if you can reach an agreement and not leave that up to the whims of the market and potentially putting you in a difficult financial situation. We'll move on to the next slide. So our mediator couldn't be here tonight, unfortunately, but I do want to just briefly mention what I think she would have mentioned, which is number one, mediation offers creative options. So when I describe what happens in court, I talk about the law and I explain that the best way to think about it is that the judges operate inside of a box. They're very limited in what they can do with respect to the house. It's either selling it or potentially one person buying out the other. Maybe you could get a delayed sale, meaning one person continues to live in that home for a period of time until some event happens, often tied to the youngest child graduating from high school, just to maintain them in the same school system. And then the house is sold at that point. Sometimes that happens with a court, not always. But you can be more creative. So I said the judges operate in the box. And when you are in mediation, you can be just a little bit outside that box and a little bit more creative. And a judge will likely approve that agreement, but it's not necessarily something that they could order. So mediation gives you that flexibility to really focus on your children, if you have children, and be creative with options for the house. Mediation also reduces emotional and financial burnouts. Mediation is an out-of-court process that you and your spouse agree to participate in. New Hampshire is very pro-mediation. Even if you do end up filing a petition for divorce in New Hampshire, the court system highly encourages people to go to mediation to try and resolve their issues. It's a way to have cost savings and really save that emotional wear and tear and legal fees and the long drawn-out process that is the court system. And it can also be a place for a neutral ground for tough conversations. So a mediator is a neutral person who is there to facilitate discussions between you and your spouse. And mediators often have very skilled conflict resolution abilities to really help navigate these challenging discussions, because a house where you have lived for many years and you have raised your children is going to have some emotional component to it. And unfortunately, right or wrong, the court system does not care about the emotion of it. They take the emotion out of it and they just look at it as a financial situation that needs to be addressed. Whereas mediation can really work through those and get at what feels right for your family, maybe a delayed sale until you get that youngest child through high school graduation. So now I am not sure who I am turning it over to. Okay, Laura, our realtor.
All right. Thank you so much, Kate. Appreciate that. So certainly some great information right there from Kate. And so just now it's coming down to making those informed decisions. You've heard some of what those options look like. So now it comes down to, okay, are we going to be looking to sell the house? Are we looking to, is one party going to buy somebody else? So of course, a majority of homeowners that own a property, this is their most valuable asset, right? So this is really a huge decision that needs to be made, of course. So it's really being proactive, no matter where you are and what stage, the earlier that we are pulled into the mix is just makes things a lot easier to the process, especially because a lot of the conversations come around what's going to happen with the home, right? So you always will come down to, as you've heard from both of the ladies prior, you need to know what the value is of that property, no matter if someone's keeping it and buying the other party out or you're selling it, right? Because those discussions are going to come around to what's the 50-50 look like. So I'm being pulled in very early on by a lot of divorce attorneys, mediators to really step in and help them with those. Also, being in the beginning of the process is have very nice open communications with both parties, because at the end of the day, both spouses are my clients. I'm there to just give a third party unbiased professional opinion of what the house is worth. Okay. And I, as a specialized divorce realtor, really understand the specific family challenges to the divorce period. And I know how to navigate with that. I've been in certain circumstances that I don't have spouses that actually communicate to each other. So I am the communicator. So I will have to hear what they have to say regarding it, translate that, and relate it to the other spouse and vice versa, just to be able to get our focus on what our end goal is. And if whether it's being selling the house, then that's what we need to do. But and sometimes the main sole communicator between those parties, that just helps the process. But if sometimes we're early on in the process, everybody's still happy and still we're amicable in conversations, that's helpful too when it comes in this particular position. A lot of the times too, I'm actually, when the decision has come and made, I'm actually written into a lot of divorce settlements that XYZ will be selling the property. So it's already been decided. So the parties already know who's going to be the one that's going to be listing and selling the property when that time comes. So again, really just making sure you're gathering all that information ahead of time, having those conversations so you really know, okay, is this what we're going to be doing? Is this the best financial decision that we need to do in our particular situation? Because every single person's divorce is different. Not one divorce is like the other. So it's really just sitting down, having those open communication, those conversations, so you can really make the best financial decision for you and your family moving forward and what your next kind of post-divorce life is going to look like. So again, like I said, talking to all of us, the earlier the better, will really set and lay that groundwork to really go as smoothly as possible. Because that, of course, is always our end hope for both parties, of course, in the end. So moving on to the next slide, just jumping into what those kind of home options, selling of the home. So if our goal is, okay, we're going to sell the home, this is what we're going to do. So of course, majority of homeowners, their goal is to get the highest value for the house. I haven't really walked into any sellers said, no, I want to sell my house for as least as possible. Of course, our goal is to really want to be selling that property for the highest amount of money. Of course, because the majority of the time there's going to be some type of split, and if everyone wants to walk away with their, of course, highest portion that they feel that they are due. Like I mentioned before, myself coming in and preparing that comparative market analysis. So I'm a real estate agent, right? So I give a market range, right? The certified licensed appraiser who you have to pay for will come in and give you a market price, right? So that's the difference between an appraiser and a real estate agent, right? So we typically do ours for free as a service, as part of our businesses. We come in and we do go through the comps. We're looking at the style of the home, the year of the home, bedrooms, bathrooms, square footage, acreage, location, neighborhoods, right? And then what upgrades have been done to the property. And then we're looking at any solar property from now and then ideally in the kind of softening market that we've been in this past year, that I ideally don't like to go back than 90 days. Typically, we won't go back further than 6 months for any closed property. And we're looking at those closed properties and going through them and finding the best comparable property that meets yours that has sold, not pending, not active. I want what has already closed that I can use as the best comp to use for your price point of your house. We are not in COVID anymore, right? So it's very strategic that we have to be when we're pricing our home. Okay. So we have definitely seen quite the shift starting at the end of last year. So in that we have seen that kind of trickle across the board nationally. So it doesn't matter where you are in the world right now. Certain parts of the country, of course, are feeling it much differently. And I'll touch a little bit more on that in a minute. So again, discussing what we need to do to actually get the house ready for the market. Sometimes if it has been a very contentious divorce, home maintenance has fell to the wayside. And I see that very commonly. We haven't kept up with the exterior of the house. We haven't been mowing the lawn. We haven't been doing the outside curb appeal or just the kind of the pruning, XYZ. The inside hasn't been really maintained and taken care of, right? We've had kids that just live in the houses, right? So we haven't had those just maintenance items been kept up for, which now we need to have the conversations of, okay, do we need to have some money spent to get the house ready for? And then I need to have attorneys involved because they want to keep track of all that and who's paying for what, right? So that's also a lot of the discussions we need to have. If we need to do some steps to get that house ready for it, we need to track who's paying for what. Can we do that? No, we're just factoring that into the price, right? Because a lot of times, ideally, if we can, that's where you're again, the goal is obviously ideally to get the most money for the property. This is what we might need. This is what we need to do to increase the value and or get the property just ready for that market. Okay. Managing the sale process and market timing, very much, especially when we are in a shifting market, right? You need to really think about what time of the market we're going to be putting the house on, right? Different parts of the country. Here in New England, right? We do have seasons that we do have typically a better kind of market, so to say, right? Spring, summer, most commonly, typically our busier market. That's not always on a continual basis, depending on our winters as well. If we get hit hard for our winters, that can be a slower time, might take a little bit longer, can really vary on those, right? We're in a seller's market right now still because properties are selling under that 6 month, right? But some kind of parts of the country are already seeing a little bit of that transitioning of that because we have see our kind of average overall days on market is ticking up and we're seeing our inventory ticking up. So keeping that in mind when we've had discussions that Kate mentioned of having a party stay in a property for X amount of time until a child graduates or whatnot. What is that market going to look like? What's my house worth now? Where could it be in a couple of years from now? Obviously, I have no crystal ball. Would love that. I'd be a millionaire. However, just keeping that in mind, right? When you're having those discussions of whether we're selling now, is that the best decision? Is it waiting until what it just makes the best financial? So it's really knowing what that market timing looks like for that. Understanding, of course, the living arrangements post-divorce, right? So if you both are in the home right now and you both need to go find something, what is that going to look like? Do you need to find, are you going to be purchasing something? Are you going to be renting something? Are you living with family? All conversations you need to be thinking and having that and planning that out because the places and people that are still having the tight inventory. And a lot of times I'm saying we have to start that process just at the same time as we're starting getting the house ready for the market, because that just might be as challenging as finding something as well. Also, there's contingencies, right, to the transition to your new home, where we have the sales going to be subject to finding a property, right? Is that going to be something you can be looking to try to get a bridge loan to hold both properties, right? So are you going to be looking into renting? So all of those possibilities that we need to have those talks and discussions. So at the end of the day, A, you're not homeless. That won't be fun. And B, we just make sure when we're getting the house in the market, if we need to set those expectations up front, I need to have that knowledge ahead of time because I need to inform all those parties that this sale is subject to sellers finding suitable housing. So that has to be known right off the get-go. Not once I have a contract come in and be like, oh, FYI, we do need to have certain amount of more time because they need to find housing. So a lot of those things we need to have those discussions. I did throw in there, this is just a chart from our National Association of Realtors that was just recently posted. You can see the existing home sales for 2025 was only up 0.3%. So again, that kind of what we've been seeing as this year's little trend. Good news though. So for people that are thinking that this actually might happen come next year, 2026, on a national level, they're forecasting that we're going to see that increase by 14%. New home sales, that means building. So this means building new construction homes was pretty stagnant this year on a national level, but they're forecasting that we'll see next year a 0.3% increase on new homes being built. Median home prices, again, only saw about 0.1%. Again, we saw a lot of markets really softening, price reductions, et cetera, a little more often that we saw this year. Next year, they're forecasting that we're going to see a 0.4% increase in the median home price versus this year. So again, that timing of that market, you need to have someone that's very knowledgeable and knows the market, works in this all day, every day to really make sure you set yourself in the right steps. Mortgage rates, obviously, Renee can talk more of this when she's up this year. Obviously, as I'm sure many people saw, we were high sixes, hit sevens, right? Then we've already started to see that kind of trickling down and forecasting by 2026, we'll see more sixes. Possibly, let's see, maybe we might see under that, but don't hold your breath too much. But, and then just the, on a national level, just the job gains. All of those kind of good conversations for sure that need to be really had. Also, just keeping in mind just those pending home sales that we have seen on a national level. Just overall this past year, we've seen the Midwest, just pending home sales have decreased by 0.4%. We've seen that then hit the hardest so far this year. Northeast, where we are, we've only seen about 0.6 decrease in our pending sales since since July's report come out. Down south, we've seen 0.1%. Out west, they haven't hit too hard in certain parts. Certain states we have seen, but overall they're seeing a little bit stronger out there. Just really keeping your eyes out there on the markets of seeing how those all are affected, because some that see those trickling to where, depending on where you are, and especially here in New England, sometimes we don't get hit right off the bat with that, but we always watch those other markets and how they're being affected by the market. Moving on to the next slide. I think that, yep. And this just goes into your home options for keeping the home, right? So can you afford it? And discussion of capital gains tax consequences. I know we had some questions already out there, and I know that we have Barb, but just going to jump on and chat a little bit more in regards to kind of the financial analysis side of all of this. Barb, I'm going to hand it off to you.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Sorry, I had to join late. I was talking on another webinar about finding hidden assets in a divorce. As you can tell, I'm a numbers person. So what I like to do is really make it also, keeping the home is a very emotional decision. So I would highly recommend bringing in someone that can maybe bounce off the financial aspects of it. So you're going to work with a mortgage advisor to see how you can afford it. Unfortunately, maybe your mortgage might go up. And so these are all things to think about. You can't just assume, I'll just keep paying the same mortgage payment. There's a lot entailed there. You definitely don't want to become house poor. As any asset transfer in a divorce, it's not taxable. So for example, if you bought a house and you paid $500,000 for it, you may pay out your spouse. Let's say now it's worth $600,000. You may pay out your spouse the $300,000, their side of the equity. That's not taxable to them. And now your cost basis for this house becomes the full cost basis of the house. So you'll see that in the next couple slides, why that can be important. Again, there's a lot to consider from a financial standpoint when you are thinking about the house, what it's going to cost. And if you decide to keep the house, have a good understanding of, let's say you only want to keep it for 2 or 3 years. Does that make sense? Because you're going to have issues to sell the house. That's certainly to factor. You keep the house, your spouse might be, oh, that's great, sounds good. They've now gotten out of a house with no cost, and you're left holding the the full realtor costs, the full capital gains. I think the next slide we have talks about, again, how do you know what the value of the home is? And you'll have various options for that. You'll work with Laura, someone like Laura, to get a competitive market analysis. You can hire an appraiser to set the price. But it's really important that you think, if you're going to keep the house, that you really try to get a good valuation of the house, because unlike retirement assets or bank accounts, there's no fixed cost to what the value of the house is. And there's many factors that can go into that value. I'm going to go to the next slide. I think, Laura, is this your slide?
Yeah, I touched a lot on these ones over here already. But yeah, so this is just, I know a lot of ours go hand in hand, of course, when it starts talking the financials and it jumps into the capital gains. But a couple of things that maybe I didn't touch on, but I think I touched on the majorities already. But just some of the complementary services that obviously with us agents can definitely help you with. Obviously, ones that work with a lot of divorce situations. Obviously dealing with, like you mentioned, the lien, mortgages, lines of credits. We've already mentioned that a lot. We've already talked about the market analysis and just getting the monthly updates on the market value, of course, if it is something you're going to hold on to. Like I already mentioned as well, depending on where you're located, I can help you with any agent across the nation, just all of those. And then, of course, like we've discussed too, just having that net sheet, showing just what those net numbers look like, minus all of the costs. Because I know, as Kate mentioned, sometimes as people have asked, will I get more for my house if I actually keep it and I buy my spouse out? Possibly. I've had certain circumstances that was the end goal, but then it took a year of them still battling out and still paying attorney's fees. And so instead of just selling the home, they spent a whole nother year paying attorney's fees, which in the long run, unfortunately, that didn't pan out for them. And so it actually would have been a better, more financial decision of actually just selling the house instead of keeping going back and forth. So it actually just depends on where you're at and where you are in your decision making when it comes around that. Jump the next slide. I think I might jump back to you, Barb. Let's just take a peek. I had a review, lien, chains, touch on that. We're just making sure that, like we've mentioned before, if there's first mortgage, second mortgage, home equity, lines of credit, we've already touched on that as well. So just making sure we have all of those records to make sure that everything needs to be paid off. That is obviously not, and then we're only talking about then at that point, whatever that net is, what the split comes down to when you're discussing that with the attorneys, et cetera. And the next slide, I think this kind of we've discussed a little bit on that. Anything else that you want to jump on, Barb, on that one? I think I've touched a little bit on that one as well.
Again, I think when you're making the decision it's such an emotional decision, and look at all of these factors. And another thing that we didn't really talk about too is you're buying your spouse out in today's market. We don't know how, the market's going to do, but now you've locked in a rate, right? So you're paying, are we at the highs? Will the market keep going? Laura can help you out with some estimates, but no one can predict if all of a sudden the housing market deteriorates. That's something that you're risking too. And I would say, really, from a financial standpoint, the most important thing is, if you do decide to buy out your spouse, make sure that this is more of a longer term decision, because there's so many embedded costs in keeping the house. Realtor fees, paying to spruce up your house to sell it, and the tax implications. There's just a lot, so that really it has to be something that will appreciate. And again, emotional, maybe it's worth it. It's probably worth it to you. But it is important to engage a team around you that can really go through all of the financial costs of keeping a house beyond the ones you think of. The roof needs repair, things like that. There's a lot more cost than just the bones of the house. And this is something that I just wanted to go through quick, because sometimes it can be underestimated. And so with capital gains, a house and the appreciation of a house, you used to be able to push a gain forward. And several years ago, they eliminated that. So when you sell your house, and if you've lived there so if you sell your house, you make money, you pay capital gains tax. It's an investment and you make money. Like anything else you make money on, you have to pay capital gains tax. This has been your primary residence, if you're a married couple, you each get a $250,000 exclusion. So some people will say to me, oh no, we're going to sell the house. My spouse hasn't lived in the house for the last 2 years. It doesn't matter. You only have to have lived in the house the last 2 out of 5 years. So for example, if your spouse hasn't lived in the house for 2 years, then it's still okay. You sell your house. They've lived in it in the last 2 out of 5 years. You sell your house. Even if you're not married, you still each get a $250,000 exclusion. So that means that for the first $250,000 that you make on your house, you don't have to pay capital gains taxes on it. So if you make $300,000 on your house, you only have to pay capital gains on $50,000. And now here's where a consideration that you need to take into something you need to take into consideration. Let's say you bought your house for $1 million or for $300,000, and now it's worth $1 million. So you paid your spouse $500,000 of their equity, and you now have $1 million house. So when you go to sell it, and let's say it's 5 years down the road, you only get that $250,000 exclusion. It's no longer $500 because it's just you, and now your spouse wouldn't have lived in the house the last 2 out of 5 years. So now you have a capital gain of, let's say, so it'd be 250 if you made 700,000, or let's just take $450,000. If you made $450,000, then you're going to have to pay capital gains taxes on $450,000. That's $90,000. Or if you're in the 20% capital gains, or worst case 15. So that's 75, let's say $75,000 that, isn't immaterial, that you now are responsible for, that your husband or your wife walked away from. They got away, they got their $500,000. They didn't have to pay capital gains. They didn't have to pay a realtor, but now you've had to pay capital gains and a realtor to sell your house. So these are just always really important things to take a look at. I have seen people try to embed the selling costs into the value of the home. I can't say that really works. I haven't seen a court that kind of likes that. Maybe you could have, if you're going through mediation, maybe you can take $50,000 off what you say is the value of the house to compensate for the fact that when you sell it, you're going to have a couple of these things. Again, these are just all some things to think about, but now's the time to think about it, because otherwise you're going to get a surprise 5 years down the road. Again, there's lots of financial considerations out there. And the main thing is just be proactive and just understand all of the costs that you'd be assuming when you buy out the spouse in the house. Kind of rhymes. And again, here's an example that just walks you through the proceeds and the exactly what we were talking about, how important it is to factor in that capital gain. So here, the capital gain would be $135,000. So when you're under the 250, and you wouldn't have to pay a capital gains tax if you sold it as a married couple and you got that full 250 exclusion and you each were able to take it. I think, Renee, this looks like your charts.
It is. Thanks, Barb. So I wanted to just show a couple of things about the market, and Laura already showed some things. So I get asked often as a lender, people trying to time the market and time the rates, and should I buy now? Should I buy later? And this is one of the charts that I might provide for you. This is based in Hillsborough County is where I ran these numbers for, and I based it on a $500,000 valued property. And it's just to show you, should I buy now or should I wait? And I did a 2-year scenario. Really what it's looking at is the $500,000 property today is likely going to cost you over $526,000 next year and $548,000 in year 2, just because the value has gone up. We still are trending up. It's slowed down, but it's still trending up. So that's all I wanted to show on this slide. Next slide, please. I also am asked often, as I'm sure Laura is, do I buy now or do I rent? And this chart, again, this is for Hillsborough County, and it's really just showing, again, the historical appreciation of homes over the last 5, 10, and 63 years. So when I run numbers for somebody, I usually use 4%. That is the national average over time. But you can see Hillsborough County has been a little above average over the last several years. And so, again, forecasted appreciation over time. It's still it's a financial decision to whether you should buy or to rent, but this just gives you some statistics to help you make that decision. And supply, where it's getting better, as Laura mentioned, but still not great. It's still not easy out there. Next slide, please. And this one, again, is a 5-year look for Hillsborough County. So that's seeing $500,000 house after 5 years. And it shows you the difference between the annual forecasted appreciation and the annual historic appreciation. So they're pretty close in Hillsborough County. But again, just to show you some of the differences. Next slide. So your options. What do we do with the house? Usually one spouse may want to keep the house, but that's not always the case. Your options, of course, you can sell the house and you can rent. You can sell the house and buy another home. Those are all the things that you need to weigh and look at all of your different options as far as the financial side of it. What makes more sense to rent or to buy? And I can provide the numbers for you, and Laura can provide some numbers for you. And ultimately, you want to have that conversation with somebody like Barb to look at your full financial picture. And if you have children, are they going to go to college? And do you need to save for that? And presumably you will want to retire at some point also. And so your housing situation, you don't want to be spending to the detriment of your potential retirement. So again, having that conversation with somebody like Barb to understand the bigger financial picture. So the options for the marital property, of course, selling it, jointly owning it for a time. We do see that there's some things you'll want to think about if you do jointly own it. You know, who's going to pay for any maintenance? Who's going to pay the mortgage? When you do decide to sell it, who's going to get the equity? How is the equity going to be split? So some things to be mindful of that you'll want in your final divorce settlement, because you can't go back and change that. And then, a buyout. What is a buyout? What does that mean? So when we talk about the division of assets, right, we come up with a value to the house and we're going to split that equity, whatever that split might be. And you have some options as far as how that split happens, right? So it's not just the house, right? There's other assets. There's maybe retirement accounts and savings accounts and investment accounts, whatever the case might be. Those are all being split, as well as your debts. Your debts are being split as well. And again, as Kate said, equitably, not necessarily 50-50. But whatever that split looks like, now the spouse that's keeping the house, because it's likely one of the bigger assets that you own, that house is probably more in equity than maybe is available through other assets. So a lot of times we will see a spouse that wants to keep the house is doing a refinance and taking some additional cash out as the buyout to the departing spouse or the out spouse. So when we talk about what does that look like? So a refinance and getting some cash out. Let's say you owe $300,000 on your existing mortgage. and you owe $50,000 to your spouse. You're keeping the house. We're going to do a new mortgage for you for $350,000. We're going to pay off your existing mortgage with the $300,000. The $50,000 goes to your spouse. Now that new loan, $350,000, is the loan that you need to qualify for. And so it's not an automatic thing. So you need to talk with your lender early on so that we can put the numbers together for you. We want to make sure that you qualify and you're not setting yourself up for failure, really. As I said, once you sign that final divorce agreement, that's it. There's no going back. So if your agreement says you have 3 months to refinance once the divorce is finalized, and then you come to me and we put the numbers together, you don't qualify, likely your agreement's going to state that if the refinance doesn't happen, you have to list the house for sale. So again, just making sure that you're talking to your lender early and understanding what your options are. So that's what a buyout looks like. Now, some of the things you want to be mindful of is if there's a HELOC, a home equity line of credit, or a second mortgage on the home, sometimes those mortgages will be in only one person's name. And you want to make sure once this divorce process starts, you want to make sure that you're putting a freeze on that. So one spouse isn't taking all of the equity out and spending it. So just something to think about. You can close those lines of credit early if you need to. And then property condition, Laura already talked about that. When you're talking about the division of assets and the condition of the property, that needs to be taken into consideration when you're putting a value on the house, right? If there's any deferred maintenance. So that's what that's talking about there. Next slide. So qualifying for a mortgage. So a couple of things to be mindful of. I am asked all the time, can you use child support and or alimony as income to qualify for a mortgage? And the short answer is yes. There's some rules around it. It's going to depend what type of a loan that you're doing. We have to show that support is being received for 6 months and at least 6 months. Some of them are shorter, some of them are longer. And then that it's going to continue for a certain length of time. So that absolutely comes into play, especially on the child support side. If the kids are generally, support ends at age 18. In New Hampshire, it ends at age 18 or when they graduate high school, and it does not continue through college age. So if somebody is age 15 already and you come to me to do a mortgage, I can't count that child support because it won't last for 3 years. So again, talk to your lender early so that you understand what your options are. There's rules about how you receive the money, where you receive the money, how much you receive. So just talk to us about that. Credit score. So super important, right? Regardless of whether you're keeping the house and refinancing, whether you're selling the house and buying something, or whether you're selling the house and renting, your credit score comes into play for all of those. We want to make sure that you know what's in your name. So I know I forget sometimes. Did we buy my car jointly, or was the car in my name only, or am I an authorized user on that credit card? I never remember. So by having your credit pulled, we can look at exactly what accounts are in your name. As you're going through this process, you've got a lot on your plate, right? There's a lot going on, and some bills could slip through the cracks, and we don't want that to happen. So we want to know exactly what debts are in your name so that you can be sure to ensure that those payments are being made every month on time. Closing accounts, right? If you are joint on an account with somebody and you want to make sure that's addressed in the final divorce settlement, who's responsible for that debt, but you also don't want to remain on that credit card. But again, talk to your lender. You don't want to close that card before you do your mortgage, because closing credit is going to actually hurt your credit score. So it negates all of that good credit history that you might have and will have a negative effect on your credit score. Make sure you're not just automatically going in and cancel cards. And keep your balances below 30%. That's the rule of thumb. If you have a credit card with a credit limit of $1,000, keep the balance owed less than 30%, so less than $300. We see a lot of times people trying to consolidate credit cards and putting it all onto one card and maxing out a card. That actually hurts your credit score as well. So again, there's some tips and tricks that we can help you with to maintain or to rebuild a credit score should you need it. Debt to income ratio. So that is one of the biggest qualifiers that a lender uses to qualify you for a mortgage. So simply put, we take your monthly debts and we divide it by your monthly income, and that gives us a number. And depending which mortgage program we're using, will tell us whether you qualify for that program or not. So we're looking at, when we look at your credit report, we're not necessarily looking at how much you owe on something. We're looking at what is your minimum monthly payment, right? So it's $25 for the credit card and it's $300 for the car, and we're adding the new mortgage in. So if the new mortgage is $2,000, we're adding the $2,000, the $25, the $300, we're adding that all together, and then we're dividing that by your monthly income. So we calculate that monthly income based on how you're paid. If you're salaried, we take your annual salary divided by 12, and we use that number. So we use all numbers before taxes and any deductions. If you are hourly, we take your hourly rate times your hours. If you have variable income, so maybe you earn overtime or bonuses or commission, we consider those variable and they change. And so we will do an average over the last 2 years. We'll take your salary piece or your hourly piece separate, and then we'll take the variable piece and average it over the last 2 years. Again, just a couple of different ways to calculate your income, but that gives us your debt to income ratios, and that helps us determine which programs you are eligible for. Last but not least, possibility of removing a liability on a previous mortgage if the divorce agreement states it. So what that means is if you are the spouse that did not stay in the home, we get this asked often where I'm the spouse that left and I want to go buy a new house, but I'm still on the mortgage, right? Maybe you're owning it jointly for a time, or maybe your spouse has 6 months to refinance before you're taking off the mortgage. But I still want to go buy a house today, but you're going to get debted for, remember, debt to income ratio. There's a mortgage on your credit. We're going to debt you for that. So that's going to hurt your debt to income ratios. But if your divorce settlement agreement is written up properly and states that your spouse has been awarded the home and is responsible for all of the payments, taxes, insurance, maintenance, everything, then the lender can exclude that debt from your numbers. But again, it has to be written up properly. So I get that question often, people thinking that they can't buy another house because they're already on a mortgage and their numbers wouldn't work. But under the right settlement agreement terms, we can exclude that mortgage from your debt. We will wrap it up and say goodnight. Thank you for joining us tonight, and thank you for all your great questions. And feel free to look at the Vesta website, and you'll be able to find other events that you are welcome to join. Again, enjoy the rest of your evening, and thanks for joining us tonight.
Good night, everyone.